Hi everybody, here's our guide to Assessment Task 2 for UNCC300. One thing that's really important is that, like all other units apart from UNCC100, this unit has 150 hours worth of learning. Only 10 of those hours are spent in class. Therefore, 140 hours is your work, the work you do preparing for class, following up from class, and doing your assessments. These assignments or assessments are they're not just a tick a box, I've done something, I'll get a mark, go by. They're the way of learning. The assessments are how you learn. So when you're doing these assessments, you're learning material. This is, if you like, it's guided learning, structured learning for you. What we want is at the end of this unit, you come out being the person in your circle of family, friends, business, work, wherever it is. You're the one who knows the most about this particular Sustainable Development Goal, this aspect of it, and how it relates to you. So this is a learning activity that you're doing, and at the end of it you'll show us something that shows us what you've learned. So that's what it's about. There's a fair bit of work in it because there's 140 extra hours in the unit. We're looking at the Sustainable Development Goals because they affect all of us. We all live on the one planet, therefore we're all affected by them. And you can't have missed hearing about them unless you've had your head under a rock for the last few years. So we, like most other universities, have a real focus on the Sustainable Development Goals in ACU. And we know that our professions are going to need them when you're out there working. We've chosen 5 of the goals for a couple of reasons. One is so that next semester when others are doing it, they're not going to try and get hold of your assignment legally or illegally and just do the same thing. You don't want to get a mark and then give someone else the benefit of that. But also because with so much choice, it can be a little bit bewildering. So we've chosen 5, and we'll have 4 or 5 each semester. And you think, oh, there's nothing there for me because I'm a nurse. Well, every single goal affects every single person. Having no hunger in the world, that doesn't just affect nutritionists, that affects people in health, education, business, performing arts, everything. For sustainable cities and communities, for example, this is out of yesterday's ABC News. You might have heard that it's very hard for regional areas to get hospitality workers. They're desperate to open cafes and holiday places and so forth, but they can't get the workers. And the reason they can't get the workers is because the wages aren't very high and they can't afford the rent. There's no rental for people. All the tree changes have gone there. This particular council here is trying to push its people to help from rent to workers rather than make money on the Airbnb market. So sustainable cities and development and communities, even just purely economically sustainable, affects everybody. If you can't get workers to town, you can't get teachers. You don't have children in the schools. Schools might close down. You might not have people in business. You might not have hospitals or health or ambulances or nursing homes. So every single profession, business is obviously affected. The performing arts, if there's no community there to actually be your audience, you can't afford to put plays and shows and galleries on. So every single goal affects every single person in different ways. So have a look at them and think, which one am I most drawn to? And then how might that affect what I'm going to do? The other reason we've chosen these is if we have ones like health and education, that gives a bit of an advantage to those who say, oh, I'm in health, I'll do the health one. We're trying to make you think a bit more broadly. This is a third-year subject after all, and you're showing that you can think broadly and actually analyse and synthesise. So have a look at these goals. See which one, climate action, everyone's affected by climate action. So see which one interests you. And, you'll find lots of things like this. This is just a quick short-term Google lookup this morning. In the report that's on your Leo site, these pages give you examples for each goal. This is the goal. There's a 2-page infographic for each goal, just giving you a snapshot of what it's about. Have a look at those and think, yeah, that's the one I'm interested in. Then go down to these pages and it gives you a few more examples that show you why the goal actually matters. Yeah, ending poverty is great, but why? Well, here are some reasons. So what you're going to do is choose one of these goals as an example, as a sort of a basis for you to work from. It doesn't mean you just look at that and say, oh, blah, blah, blah. You find that example, which I'll show you in a second, and then you think, okay, how does that relate to me? Ending poverty, I'm going to use ending poverty as an example because none of us are doing that in this unit, so that's being fair to everybody. And you're going to answer the questions related to the goal and example that you've chosen. What is really important, I can't stress this enough, is that write in your own words. This is a personal reflective piece. We want to know what you think. I don't want to know what somebody who can, write an assignment for you or that people in different articles have put together and this is what they say in fancy formal language. We want to know what you understand. when we mark you on clarity of writing, it's not so much, fancy words and jargon, because jargon's not clarity. Jargon is really evil in my view. But it's saying this is what you've written and what you understand. And I'll talk a bit more about that in a second. But that is this is key. In your own words. We want to know what you think. How would you explain it to your friends and family? So here's my goal. I'm choosing goal 1 here. This is one of the examples in those pages. Social protection coverage, in other words, a social safety net. So here, half the world's population don't have social protection. That means if they're out of work, which some of you and people you know will have been during the COVID crisis, if there was no social safety net, no JobKeeper, job seeker, any sort of employment benefits, people starve. Now, if people don't have money, they can't buy things in your business. They can't afford to send their children to school, perhaps. They can't afford health care, which means A, they get sicker, and B, they might not be able to afford you. This might be you in this boat as well. So this is the goal. So this is my goal, and I'm going to look at this one. I'm going to look at the social safety net that people do or don't have. Only 1/5 of people who are unemployed had unemployment benefits. Now, you imagine what that was like. 87 countries out of 100 and whatever it is don't have unemployment protection. So it varies. Look, half the people in our area get them, in 44% in Europe, 3% in Africa, and 12% in Latin America. So differences again across groups as well. So this is my example, social safety nets. So I'm going to look at ending poverty, and I'm going to look at, say, unemployment benefits. Okay, so that interests me. Maybe I'm going to be a teacher. So then I'm going to say, these are the questions you're going to answer. What's the goal? It's goal 1 in poverty. The example is this social safety net. Just put the name of it there. You can put you can just copy this social protection, blah, blah, blah. That's my example. And then I want to know, what's the goal doing? What's the problem it's hoping to solve? Don't just copy from the document. Just say, well, people who don't have unemployment benefits, most of the world doesn't get unemployment benefits. That means they're not going to be able to look after themselves, their families, and contribute to the economy and the community. That's the problem. We're trying to solve the problem that people can't afford to eat, basically. So summarize what's in there. Now, I've said summarize, paraphrase. That's easy to say, and it's actually can be quite difficult to do. So this is some help for those of you who may not be all that comfortable with doing it. It is a skill that you need to learn. Don't feel bad if you're still getting caught up in it. It takes time. What's really important, though, paraphrasing is not just changing words. It's not just moving a few words around and thinking, oh, that's okay, I've changed the order of words, or I've replaced a word here or added one there. That's not adding it. It's bringing material together. Para means around. Getting lots of material, putting it together, and explaining it in your own words. So here's a whole lot of information. I want to explain that to Grandma. My baseline is, can Grandma understand it? And I'm about to be a grandma, so I'm allowed to say that. Now, this is one way that you might find useful. The easiest way to do it is, imagine you're going to explain it to someone. You're telling your friends at work, or your parents, your grandma, whatever. They don't know anything about the SDGs and what you're going to do as a grown-up. So you're going to try and explain it to them. Now, if you try and use it in highfalutin fancy language, they're going to look at you like you're some sort of Martian, and they're not going to understand anything. So the best way to do it is get all the information you want, put it together, and then say, okay, here's all my information. I'm going to put this in language that Grandma can understand. Real words. Then you can rewrite it using grown-up words. Not like, the baby's in the mother's tummy, as one of my midwifery students once said. Not that. But in just proper words, not jargon. Discipline-appropriate words are fine. Jargon means a word that only the in-crowd know. It's just something that, like, an AFP or an NFT. What does that mean? Use real words that grown-up people can understand. What we want is for you to come back to this assignment 2 years later and know what you wrote. So if you don't know what you write now, we're not going to know when we mark it. For heaven's sake, don't use a thesaurus or a dictionary, and if you use a paraphrasing tool, I'll come out and break your kneecaps. It's really bad. It doesn't help us to understand what you know. We want to know what you think. Use a dictionary to find out what a word means, by all means, but if you don't know what it means, don't use it. And for heaven's sake, don't choose another fancy word, because 9 times out of 10, if you have to use a thesaurus to find another word, it means you don't understand it and the word doesn't make sense. We get some really good laughs over the words that people choose. So while we like a bit of comedy, please don't make us laugh while we're marking. Then you're going to say how or why this goal is relevant to what you want to do in the future, your ideal profession, your future job, whatever it might be. So in other words, with the lack of social safety net, say I'm going to be a performing artist. How does the lack of a social safety net in the world, how does it affect what I do and all the people I might work with? Well, if I'm a performing artist and there's no security net, I can't afford to eat. We know that people in the arts got very little support, if any, during COVID. What did they do? How did they survive? They might be able to just survive, but they can't do their creative acts. And then if there's no safety net, people can't afford food. They're not going to afford to come to a show, are they? So, I might be able to work. I might have enough money to survive and do my own creative work, but no one's going to come and look at it. So how might it affect either what I do in my profession or what my profession overall does, and or the people I might work with, the people I do my creating with, my audience, whatever it might be. So have a think about, where's it going to affect me? Think a bit broadly. Don't just start writing, I'll have this done in an hour. Jot down notes. Do a bit of brainstorming. Who are the people I work with? What am I doing? Who might be affected and how? Have a sort of a think around and make them all mesh together. Here's my goal. So again, this is my goal. Who's it going to affect and how's it going to affect the people I work with? If I'm a teacher, if people can't afford to eat, they might have sent their children out to beg. And that happens so often in countries. They might turn to crime, prostitution, drugs, all sorts of things. They might just starve. They might just quietly die. That's not good. So, and children who suffer poverty, their growth is stunted, their development stunted. Later on when I'm a teacher, I might have these kids coming to my school and their brains have been affected by long-term malnutrition or violence, which again accompanies poverty like sunshine and rain in Melbourne. So think a bit more broadly. Don't just think, don't be linear, A, B, C, D. Think broadly, get a big picture. What might be some of the issues? We want to know what you think, what you can see. And the broader you can see things and the more you can sort of weave things in together, the better you're going to understand the area. In a short 1 to 2 paragraphs, just summarize the message. Again, don't just copy from the assignment, from the document, but tell us what it means. What's the message? It's saying, well, in this one, it's saying, well, most countries, people in most countries don't have a social safety net. They're not protected. And you can see very quickly here, it differs globally. In sub-Saharan Africa, compared with Europe and North America. The vulnerable population, of the unemployed, how many get social security? 3%. Here, it's nearly half. So the other thing is saying, what's the global situation? Give us an overview. Is it even across the world? Is every country or area affected differently? Well, clearly not. In this one, the richer parts of the world, they suffer less than the poorer parts of the world. So it's not consistent globally. That's what we want you to say. We don't want you to say every single question, but you can say in areas like sub-Saharan Africa, Central Asia, Eastern and Southern Asia, where they are considered to be developing countries or poorer countries, they're far worse off than the richer, developed, industrialized countries. We want an overview so that Grandma knows what's the overall picture in the world. Give us a snapshot of that. So again, I shouldn't have gone back. I could have gone forward. Here it is. So now, what we want you to do now is say, we're going to look at 3 of the CST principles. One is human dignity, one is the common good, and one is another one that you can choose. These are 3 separate questions. I've put them on one slide just to make it easier. So you're going to look at how that situation affects human dignity. How does the lack of a social safety net in the broad global area affect human dignity? So, well, those who've got social security safety nets, they feel valued, they're able to look after themselves, their children and their communities. Those who haven't, don't. And it differs in different parts of the world. Yes, is human dignity affected differently in sub-Saharan Africa and Europe? You bet your bottom dollar, because people are valued more, or seem to be valued more, because they get some money. And the same with the common good. How does the lack of social security in sub-Saharan Africa affect the common good? Well, if the common good is about people being able to contribute to their community, give their best to it and get something from it, if that community is fractured or not even able to be there, it can't give back to its people and they can't give to it. So how does the common good affect it? And the other principle that you choose, of those 9, it must be one of the 9 that's on our Leo site. Don't go Googling off CST principle and come up with something really obscure. Use the ones on the Leo site. So for each of those, how does the lack of a social safety net, lack of unemployment benefits, whichever part of the example I want to focus on, and you can choose a part of it, it's just giving you a grounding, like a context within which to write. How does lack of unemployment benefits affect human dignity globally? Is it the same across the world? No, it's not. How does it affect the common good? Is it the same across the world? No, it's not. How does it affect preferential option for the poor? Is it the same across the world? Well, obviously not. Whatever you want to choose. Now, we want you to find an example of a community in another country. This might be a geographic community, like a city, for example, Addis Ababa in Ethiopia, or a community of a demographic community like young children or bisexual men or older women or coal mine workers. As long as you have got a community, it doesn't matter if it's geographic or demographic, tell us who the community is, who's in it, where is it, and then tell us how achieving the goal of ending poverty would help that community. How would children under 5 in Mali be helped by ending poverty? How would coal miners in China be helped by ending poverty? Whatever it might be, or by giving unemployment benefits. But at this stage, we're really looking at the overall goal. So we're going back to the goal, ending poverty. How would ending poverty help this community? And why does it matter? Why does it matter if children in Mali under 5 die from poverty? Why does it matter if coal miners in China die and coal mine collapses because of poverty? So telling us why it matters. How would it help that community, and why is that a good thing? Hint, common good, human dignity, blah, blah, blah. They're people like us. Finally, you'll have to do some referencing in this, obviously, because you've used these sources, but we want references that are relevant and easily found by the reader. If you start Googling, common good, and get some obscure Polish journal of business practice and you're a nurse, which has happened, all that tells me is either you didn't write the assignment yourself or you've got no idea what you're writing. We want a reference list that anybody can find. You shouldn't have to go outside of what's in the Leo site, probably, apart from finding your community, and you might even get that from the UN goals. But we just want a list that's a reference list that's fulfilling the purpose of a reference list. You have a reference list because whenever you have an idea or a fact that's not your own, 50% of people in 5-year-old children in Mali are malnourished. That's not something you've done yourself. You found that somewhere. You put that in your question. And so I thought, that's interesting. I'm going to look that up. I know where to go. I go to your reference list and the information's there and I can go, that was Smith & Jones. Here's the reference. I can find it. So don't just Google and find something that looks like it's got the right bit and put the abstract in, because that just tells us that it suggests to us that you didn't write it, and that gives a bit of an alert to us. I don't want that to happen. So the reference list may not be large. It's how you use them and how appropriate they are, not the quality of your obscureness. There's no minimum quantity. Obviously, you're going to have to use the SDG report. That's clearly going to be there because that's where you're using that. But whenever you do something in your site, in your text, that's somebody else's idea or thought or fact, put a reference in there saying Smith & Jones 2035, whatever it might, maybe not. And then in your reference list, just make sure that reference is there and easy to find. Tell us the style you're using. We're not marking you on, whether you've got a full stop or an italicizing or not. That's not the point. It's just so that we get an idea that this is a style you're using and it's consistent. If you start out with Vancouver and then your next one is Harvard, the next one's APA, that really tells me that you didn't do it yourself. So just tell us so that the marker knows, they're doing this particular mode. We're not fussed about whether you've got a full stop or an italics. We're not publishing this. We want to know, is it readable, accessible? Does it match what you've said in your text? If you've quoted Smith & Jones for this fact and Smith & Jones reference doesn't have it, then you'll be in trouble. Not obscure, not fancy, just be appropriate. We're marking you on what you understand, not on, how fancy pants your references are. I hope that helps.